It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker here today, Congressman Chris Smith. He's a senior member of the House of Representatives. He's a Republican from New Jersey. He is the Special Representative on Human Trafficking Issues for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. He's a ranking member in the House of Representatives of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Africa, Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations Subcommittee. He's co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission and ranking member of the Bipartisan Congressional Executive Commission on China. He's the author of 5 human trafficking laws in the United States, including Landmark Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 and subsequent anti-trafficking laws in 2003 and 2006, which has influenced many countries to adopt their own laws and has boosted the global movement. 2019, President Trump signed Congressman Smith's Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act, which includes provisions for educating school children to protect them from sexual exploitation and trafficking. He's the author of International Megan's Law of 2016, based on the tragic loss of a 7-year-old girl in New Jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I've taken a little time with this is because I want to emphasize this leadership of this great member of the House of Representatives and how pleased we are to have him here with us today to present the keynote address. Thank you, Congressman, for being here.
Governor Gilmore, thank you so very much for that kind introduction, for your outstanding work you did both as a governor and now as our ambassador, and the work that you did, landmark work on combating terrorism. I remember you testifying before Congress on terrorism, and we know terrorism and terrorist organizations are themselves involved with human trafficking. Again, I want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership. We're very proud of you over here, and so glad you are where you're at. And thank you to Tatiana and all the other leaders of the efforts to combat human trafficking. I am talking to the people who know this issue and live this issue and are concerned about it. So I want to thank you. This is teamwork. We all have to be in this together. I want to also thank you for the outstanding report. Having information and recommendations based on real, concrete data is critical. And as we all know, COVID-19 is having a serious negative impact on anti-trafficking efforts, on patterns of trafficking, and on victims, and even on survivors. As the governor mentioned, I am the Parliamentary Assembly Special Representative on Human Trafficking. Over the years, I've offered, as he said, 5 U.S. laws. The Trafficking Victim Protection Act is still the law of our land. It's a comprehensive whole of government approach, both domestic and international. It treats the trafficking victims as they ought to be treated, as victims, not perpetrators of crimes. And it holds the traffickers to account with up to life imprisonment. And it emphasizes, as you all do in all of your laws, the 3 Ps: prevention, prosecution, and protection. And so I want to thank you for the great work you're doing. Secretary Pompeo just recently released the 2020 Trafficking Victims Protection Act's tip report. And it is a great read. It's available online if you go to the State Department website. And it holds us to account as well. All the countries, there's a narrative based on the 3 Ps on how well or poorly we're all doing, including the United States, because we have a serious problem of human trafficking here, as do all of you. So thank you for that. Let me just continue and say, we need to be seriously addressing the issues of trafficking. And what is happening during COVID-19? Increased victim vulnerability. We're all seeing it, especially for women and children. The heightened insecurity of victims in 2020 and beyond, as government and philanthropic resources are diminished or even dried up in some cases. Ensuring a sustained and robust criminal justice response during and after the pandemic, and so much more. Modern day slavery hasn't diminished. In many ways, it's actually gotten worse during COVID-19. Victims still need to be rescued. Survivors still need assistance. Vulnerable people have been made even more vulnerable by both the virus and its deleterious impact on the global economy. And I do believe, and I think you agree with this, when things start to reopen, traffickers may even have an easier time finding, deceiving, coercing, and exploiting victims. There will be a heightened sense of vulnerability. You've asked me to focus briefly on some of the effects of the pandemic on the sexual exploitation of children, especially online. Well, the survey confirms with empirical data that the pandemic has increased the vulnerability of children to becoming victims. New patterns of exploitation and cruelty have emerged due to increased online activity, greater use of social media, and even social distancing practices. People are isolated. Kids are isolated. As the survey points out, and I quote it, the COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating vulnerabilities of children to THP due to school closures, increase in domestic violence, and economic insecurity of households, as well as children's increased time online. Law enforcement agencies in Europe, the report goes on to say, have reported increased online grooming and exploitation of children through the internet, as well as an exponential increase or growth of child exploitation material that is shared online. The survey also found that there are an increased number of reports of child abuse, including new ways to sexually exploit and abuse children, such as live streaming, child sexual abuse, or the establishment of, quote, delivery or drive-through services. Europol reported on conversations in online forums, including those on the dark web, on increased availability of children online during COVID-19 due to isolation and unsupervised internet access. It is clear that we all need to act, and even to act more decisively. Today, with many schools partially or completely closed, children are spending more of their time online. We know that, and they are vulnerable to being groomed by sexual predators and lured into trafficking situations, and also providing sexually explicit images of themselves that can be distributed online or used to blackmail the child into providing more. As the survey notes, such grooming is increasing and is happening online through gaming sites and social media platforms. Most children are unprepared for the psychological coercion or the false promises used by traffickers to entice and enslave their victims. Children also may inadvertently make themselves vulnerable by engaging in high-risk behaviors online, such as lying about being older to access certain platforms, or sending explicit photos or videos of themselves, known as sexting. In late March, the FBI issued a very strong warning to parents in the United States to be more vigilant. The NGO ECPAT has done great work in raising concerns that while sex tourism may be on hold during the shutdown of the travel industry, sexual predators are at home and online seeking to groom children so that they can meet and abuse them in person when travel restrictions are lifted. ECPAT has written two great guides. One of them is called the Youth Online Safety Guide. Another one is targeted at parents, which I hope may be of use in OSCE countries. I've read it. I've shared it with my family. We need to share it, and my constituents. We need to share it with everybody. This is something that's happening in plain sight as kids go off to their rooms, and then these predators are laying in wait to exploit them. Students and teachers need to be educated. You can find a discussion on this in the survey report and the recommendation number 57. I think it's very well laid out. This was also a topic of a resolution that I authored and was adopted by last year's OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Annual Session in Luxembourg. It focused on educating students and teachers on how to identify and avoid human trafficking, the prevention piece. In Luxembourg, I also held an event that discussed how NGOs, including the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, we actually had the great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, who was a great leader in human rights, present, because they're doing wonderful work in this area. We also had the 821 campaign, the Just Ask, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, because all of them have created situational awareness courses for students and for teachers. In January of 2019, President Trump signed a law that I wrote that we named after Frederick Douglass, a man who was a slave, escaped slavery, and then became one of the greatest. We celebrated his 200th anniversary of his birthday in 2019, but he became one of the greatest abolitionists the world has ever seen. Well, we named the bill after him, and it is to ensure, the main part of that bill, that children in the United States are educated in an age-appropriate manner about how to avoid becoming victims of sex and labor trafficking. I want to thank each and every one of you for your caring, for your concern, for your compassion, and for your courage to fight for the weakest and most vulnerable. We're all in this together, and I want to thank ODIHR for the great work they're doing. Thank you.